Ethan Vale was halfway down the executive corridor when the sound stopped him, not words, but laughter. Light, careless, completely out of place in a building where every step was measured in profit and risk. He glanced toward the glass-walled conference room on his right, expecting to see junior staff on a tour. Instead, he saw two small figures sitting side by side at the long mahogany table, their feet not even touching the floor. Twins. They were dressed neatly, hair brushed with obvious care, hands wrapped around identical juice boxes. One leaned toward the other, whispering something secret, and they both burst into giggles. Ethan felt an odd tightening in his chest and looked away, until one of them turned. The boy lifted his head, and the world seemed to stall. Gray eyes. Not just gray, but that rare steel shade Ethan had inherited from his own father. The same sharp brows, the same slight tilt of the head when curious. And then he saw it, the faint scar above the left eyebrow, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. His scar. Ethan's breath caught, his fingers loosened around the tablet in his hand, nearly dropping it. He took a step closer to the glass, heart pounding so loudly he was sure someone inside could hear it. The girl turned next, and the resemblance struck just as hard. Different expressions, same bones, same face. His face. No, he murmured under his breath. The woman seated beside them noticed him then. She stiffened instantly, her hand moving protectively to rest on both small shoulders at once. Ethan recognized her before his mind was ready to accept it. Lena. Older. Yes, stronger, too, but unmistakably her. The woman he hadn't thought about in years, not because he didn't care, but because caring had hurt too much. Their eyes met through the glass. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, fear, resolve, all in the space of a heartbeat. She looked away first. Ethan stepped back as if burned. His mind raced, scrambling for explanations, coincidences, anything that didn't make his pulse roar in his ears. Employees passed him in the hall, nodding respectfully, unaware that their untouchable billionaire CEO felt like the ground had vanished beneath his feet. 5 years ago, a quiet voice whispered in his memory. Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the twins through the glass once more. Those children didn't just resemble him. They belonged to him. Ethan shut the door to his office harder than he meant to. The soft click of the lock echoed like a verdict. For the first time in years, the room that usually made him feel powerful felt suffocating. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city he owned in pieces, buildings bearing his investments, streets moved by his money. None of it mattered. He dropped into his chair and stared at his reflection in the dark screen of his monitor. The eyes looking back at him were the same ones he had just seen on those twins. No, he whispered again, but this time it sounded like a plea. Ethan forced himself to breathe and did what he had always trusted. He analyzed. He opened his calendar from 5 years ago, scrolling past board meetings and overseas flights until he found it. March. Lena's name appeared more than once. Dinners, weekends blocked off, a rare period when ambition had taken a back seat to something warmer. His jaw tightened as memories resurfaced. Her laugh, her frustration when he canceled plans, the night she cried and asked him to choose. Then came the gap. 2 weeks of messages from her. Missed calls. Voicemails he never heard because his assistant had filtered. Distractions, during the merger battle. Ethan opened the archived folder, hands shaking now. We need to talk. Please call me back. It's important, Ethan. The timestamps hit him like blows. He pulled up his travel records next, cold logic slicing through denial. A business trip delayed. A night he stayed. A morning he left before she woke. He did the math without meaning to, counting months, subtracting weeks, lining up dates until there was no space left for coincidence. 5 years. The twins were 5. Ethan leaned back, pressing his palms to his eyes. In negotiations, he was ruthless. In crises, unshakable. But this dismantled him. He pictured Lena standing alone with a pregnancy test, calling a man who never answered. He pictured himself on magazine covers, praised for focus, for sacrifice, for winning at all costs. The cost had just come due. A soft knock sounded at the door. His assistant's voice filtered through, careful. Sir, are you all right? Ethan straightened slowly, schooling his face into something resembling control. Cancel my next meeting, he said hoarsely. And find out why there are children in HR today. As the footsteps retreated, he stared at the city again, numbers still running through his head. For the first time in his life, the math didn't lead to profit. It led to the truth he could no longer ignore. The office lights were dimmed by the time Lena stepped inside. Ethan had dismissed everyone else, insisting on privacy. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument they'd ever had. She stood near the door, her posture straight, chin lifted, not defiant, but prepared. Prepared for disappointment. Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk, but she didn't sit. Just say it, she said quietly. You didn't ask me here to make small talk. He swallowed. Up close, he could see the exhaustion she carried, the kind that came from years of responsibility with no backup. The twins, he began, then stopped. Words failed him, something that had never happened in a boardroom. They're mine, aren't they? For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded once. Yes. The simplicity of the answer knocked the air from his lungs. Ethan gripped the edge of the desk. Why didn't you tell me? A bitter smile flickered across her face. I tried. She reached into her bag and placed her phone on the desk, sliding it toward him. Do you want to see how many times I called? He didn't need to. He already knew. You disappeared, she continued, her voice steady but low. Your assistant said you were unavailable. The tabloids said you were engaged to your company. And then I saw your face everywhere. Magazines, interviews, headlines about how you never let emotions interfere with business. Her eyes finally met his, and the hurt in them was unmistakable. I realized there was no space for me. Or for them. Ethan shook his head. I would have. But you didn't, she cut in gently. So I made a choice. She straightened, pride threading through her pain. I raised them myself. I worked nights. I learned how to fix broken toys and calm fevers at 3 a.m. I didn't want them growing up waiting for someone who might never come. The words landed harder than anger would have. Do they know? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They know you exist, Lena said. Not your name, not your money, just that you were someone important once. She hesitated. I didn't come here for your fortune, Ethan. HR offered relocation assistance. That's all. Ethan closed his eyes. In business, truth was a weapon. Here, it was a mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. When he opened them again, his voice was rough but certain. I won't disappear again. Lena studied him carefully, weighing promises against history. We'll see, she said at last. And for the first time, Ethan knew this was a negotiation he couldn't win with power, only with change. The boardroom had never felt so cold. Ethan stood at the head of the table while 12 executives stared at him in disbelief. The merger documents lay untouched, glowing on the screen behind him. This deal had been years in the making, billions in projected growth, headlines already written in advance. Normally, Ethan would be halfway through his presentation by now, dismantling objections before they were voiced. Instead, he closed the folder. We're postponing the merger, he said calmly. A ripple of shock moved through the room. One board member leaned forward. Postponing, he repeated. Ethan, the market is primed. This delay could cost. I'm aware of the cost, Ethan interrupted, his tone firm but measured. And I'm prepared to accept it. Silence followed. No one challenged him further. They had never seen this version of him, decisive, yet unmoved by profit. When the meeting ended, the executives filed out in stunned quiet, whispers trailing behind them like aftershocks. Ethan didn't hear them. He went straight to the small waiting lounge near our. The twins sat on a couch, legs swinging just as before, crayons scattered across a low table. Lena watched him carefully as he approached, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. Ethan lowered himself to their level, something he'd never done in his life, not physically, not emotionally. Hi, he said softly. The boy studied him with open curiosity. Mom says you're very busy. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He nodded. I was. Then he allowed himself a small, honest smile. But I'm learning how to be present. The girl tilted her head. Do you work here? I do, he answered. But today, I took time off. That seemed to impress them. The boy grinned. Lena looked away quickly, blinking. Ethan stood and faced her. I can't fix the past, he said quietly. But I want to earn the future. Not with money, with time. She searched his face, looking for arrogance, for control, and finding neither. Only resolve. Start slow, Lena said at last. They don't need a billionaire. They need consistency. Ethan nodded. Then that's what they'll get. As the twins laughed over a shared crayon, Ethan understood something no balance sheet had ever taught him. For the first time, he had chosen not to win. He had chosen to stay.